Hey, Scott here from the Church's Lane podcast. In this clip, we talk about how Lecrae had concerts canceled for saying the things that most of us are thinking anyway. If you want to see more videos about how churches do stupid things that break the entire body, please hit the like button and subscribe. Thanks a lot, and enjoy this clip.
Well, I was going to say Lecrae, but I'm okay with Lecrae. It's more like what happened to him. You know, he's apparently been having some problems with just kind of the church, the big C church, right? There's a lot of craziness, kind of going through that deconstruction phase that a lot of people are going through, but that's causing a lot of people to fall away from the church, right?
Right.
But he kind of managed to by the grace of God, right, get steered back on the course, kind of realizing that the problem wasn't Jesus. The problem was, people.
Right.
And so he sent out this tweet that said, once upon a time, I thought I was done with Christianity. But the reality was I was just done with the institutional, corporatized, gentrified, politicized, culturally exclusive version of it. And I don't have anything in that entire statement that I can, complain about, right? Because these are all things that I see in the church and that I'm sure you and, well, pretty much most of our friends group probably also sees in the church. Of course, we talked about institutionalization, right? Like the Catholic Church we just talked about is a huge institution and that has its own problems.
Right.
Corporatizing, if I'm understanding his point there, is just a lot of churches have become a consumer product.
Sure. Yeah.
And of course, I mean, never mind the exclusivity of many churches and just how utterly politicized things can get. I mean, there were a number of articles, going through that I just passed up that were from almost exclusively one of the RSS feeds that I get. I mean, some of the most horribly politicized things I've ever seen come out of a Christian's, mind.
Right.
It was just madness. And he is absolutely right to call the church out for this behavior. This is not Jesus. I mean, we read the Gospels and we read Acts, we read anything in the New Testament, we read anything in the Old Testament. Ain't nothing prepares us to create a Christianity like we often see out there.
Oh, Mark, but Lecrae, he's just spewing venom. He's just hating on the church and spewing venom. He's not a real Christian.
Yeah, and I would love to slap anybody that actually said that.
But there's going to be pastors all across the country that bring this up and say exactly that. That there are just people who are, because spewing venom is the phrase. I hate it. And anytime anybody says anything that is even slightly critical of the church, they're automatically spewing venom.
And the worst part is these were probably all the same people that jumped on the bandwagon.
Kanye?
Yeah, Kanye.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Kanye.
yeah.
It's like, hey, nothing about that man's life is going to make me think he's pulled a full 180.
Right.
Yeah. But now he's doing, gospel albums. It seems like a money move to me, right?
Right.
I cannot be more than cynical enough about that. Just based on his life. But Lecrae, I think, has really done a great job of establishing himself and who he is in the Christian world. I mean, ultimately, he's an artist and, he's a performer. He does this stuff. So the fact that this tweet caused one of his future tour dates to cancel on him, because that conservative Christian cancel culture that, we're hearing so much on Fox News about.
Right.
It's like they canceled a show, which is not just him. It's going to be him, and it's going to be him, and then all of the road crew, any of the other artists and their road crews that they're being traveled with. That's a really big deal. That's a lot of people that are they're losing a portion of their income for a legitimate criticism of the church. And, if anybody's been traveling in the circles necessary to make that kind of a complaint, it's going to be a Christian performer who is going to see all the worst parts of Christianity, right? He's going to see the judgmentalism behind closed doors. He's going to see how money makes decisions more than the gospel and more than God's law. He's going to see all of that stuff. And I've heard some really, really terrible stories about the Christian music industry, past and present.
Yeah.
Christian music industry is probably the least Christian thing that exists.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting how we live in the age of information. We live in the internet age. Information literally traverses the world at the speed of light. Like, that's not hyperbole. That's physics, right?
Yeah.
And so in the span of 2 tweets, he literally floated a hypothesis and proved it, right?
Yeah.
Hypothesis. The churches are institutional, corporatized, gentrified, and it took me a long time to wrap my head around gentrification, right? In the most pared down definition, gentrification is when an area that is traditionally a low income, low class area then becomes the new cool spot for rich people to move into. Right. And of course, this is the history of humanity, right? Empire, manifest destiny. Let's get in our boats and dislocate Native Americans. Let's put poor people into housing slums. Let's tear down those slums to make whole food markets.
I mean, Lecrae is black, if you're not aware, anybody listening. And there is something very particular to a black experience, a class of people that has been systemically repressed through history. I mean, if you don't believe me, just look at, redlining didn't get outlawed until my lifetime.
Yeah. But Mark, it's not just black lives that matter. All lives matter, Mark. The whole point of wanting to become a celebrity is to cast a wide net as possible, to have as many people as possible buy your whatever it is, whether it's a movie, whether it's your photography or your music, right? Your whole goal is to cast a wide of net as possible. I don't think Lecrae's point is that his music is being gentrified. I think his point is that the gospel no longer belongs to everybody. Now it just belongs to rich white suburbanites who can build ginormous, beautiful cathedrals in the middle of the most upscale areas of their cities.
His comment about being culturally exclusive, I mean, I mean, seen a lot of that.
Yeah.
But especially, when it comes to, like the Christian music scene, it's some of the worst garbage I've ever seen, because while you have artists like Lecrae, or if you're more like me, Demon Hunter, right? You're out there making your music, hoping to reach out to people who are not already believers.
Right.
But you have so many Christian radio stations, like K-Love is the big one everybody listens to, WMBI, there's various, smaller radio stations throughout the country, websites. It's all stuff that it's preaching to the choir. Like,
right.
That's what it's doing. Christians have done a really good job of making a cultural world that nobody else wants to be a part of. And then they act all surprised when nobody wants to be part of it. It's like, you just want to make Christians feel good about being Christian.
Right.
Not actually encourage them to grow as believers.
Yeah.
Which if you listen to some of Lecrae's lyrics, that's kind of something he is concerned about,
Yeah.
If you're a believer, he wants you to be a better believer. If you're not a believer, he wants you to believe.
Part of that is the history of mankind. So let's go back to Jesus dies, and you have these disciples who are now supposed to do something, but how many of them are actually documented doing anything of note? It is the human condition to kind of sit around and look in the mirror and go, look how star-spangled important I am now.
Yeah, like the apostle of greatest note in the New Testament is Paul.
Yeah, exactly.
Wrap your mind around that if you haven't thought about that in a while. I mean, maybe it's because the transformation was so powerful, but the other guys, like John, James, Peter, like they just kind of hung out in Jerusalem. I mean, they were doing important work.
Right.
But it was Paul, the Pharisee, who, was there when Stephen got stoned, that went out and had the greatest impact. Right.
And so all that to say, like 2,000 years later, and not much has changed. So this now to Lecrae's, to his credit, he says the word venue. I got canceled by a venue, but it was probably a church, right? It was most likely a church that canceled him.
Oh yeah, like this was not United Center,
right?
or Rosemont Horizon, if you want to be that guy.
Right.
It's like, and like he refused to name it, which, I kind of want to reach him, like, brother Lecrae, please just tell the world who this venue is, because quite frankly, I think people deserve to know who that venue is. Like, if they cannot take the criticism, because the church is certainly not above criticism. And for anybody, and any Christian to sit there and not take criticism, I don't care if it's from the most angry, Richard Dawkins type atheist, out there. If they want to criticize you, just sit there and eat it. Why? Because if you respond in love, it kind of starts to undermine some of their complaints.
Right.
They don't have to agree with you.
Yeah.
You're not going to convince them to believe in God, but just take it.
Yeah.
And when the church cannot take criticism from another Christian who's not being a vitriolic jerk about it, you want to talk about snowflakes. This is some snowflake stuff right here. It makes me sad.
Right. So, like, in my mind, one of two things happened here. One possibility is that they really do kind of have this leadership team that's kind of like, oh, well, he's gone off the reservation, and we can't bring, like, that kind of unknown X factor into our church, because who knows what would happen, what he's going to say. Like, there's just too many unknowns. We just see a bunch of red flags, and we're going to protect ourselves by not bringing him here. To me, that's option one. Option two is they saw the tweet, an unconscious part of their mind kind of went, oh, that kind of describes us. Institutional, corporatized, gentrified, politicized, culturally exclusive. That kind of looks like us.
Yeah, so let's prove his point for him.
Yeah, if they would have slowed down and not had an emotional response, but actually thought through the process. Like, what would thinking through the process with the filter of Christ-likeness, what would that process would have looked more like?
Oh my, I mean, yeah, you want to talk about something that could have been grace-filled and wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, that could have been it, because Lecrae did not tweet, hey, venue, you are this way. He was talking about things in a very broad sense. If somebody speaking of things in a very broad sense hits you that hard, I mean, that's a sign right there. Whatever response you have emotionally is fine. I mean, that's your emotions are your emotions. When you kind of calm down from that, right? Your heart should have been turning to God and be like, hey, I just got really angry at somebody insulting me when they said nothing to insult me. What's going on?
Yeah.
What's going on with me? Like, you could have really had an opportunity to pour yourself out before God and to open yourself up to the leading of the Holy Spirit to find out what is your damage, what's your malfunction, or that's it. It's like what is wrong with me? Create me a clean spirit, O Lord, and renew a right spirit within me. Like, that psalm should kind of be echoing in your head, because that's an opportunity for the Lord to work.
I feel like there was a moment where the church could have looked at this and said, he is saying things that lots of people are saying, and this is now an opportunity to bring this message to our flock and help them understand how this is not a man or even a movement that wants bad for the church. This is a movement that is trying to redefine church for the next generation. We know that there's a potential powder keg here, but let's bring him anyway. Most concerts happen Thursday, Friday, Saturday, right? So let's bring him here. Let's go ahead and have his concert, but let's ask him to stay and let's have him be a guest on our Sunday morning service. And let's give him a chance to speak directly to our church and give us his perspective on what these things mean to him, what it means to be black and poor in institutional Christian America, in corporatized Christian America, in white Christian America. This was an opportunity to build bridges. Don't build walls, build bridges. And I felt like this was an opportunity lost to build a bridge of understanding between two different cultures.
His big complaint here is that, he thought he was about to be ready. Wow. English. He said he was about ready to just give up on the church, right? And Again, there's been that huge movement towards deconstruction that has really been causing a lot of people to leave the church, hence the term exvangelicals
Right.
has become a thing, or nuns, the Nones. Here's a guy who went through that deconstruction and stayed in the church.
Right.
That's such a valuable tool right there.
Yeah.
That you had somebody who went through that. This is somebody you should be tapping.
Right.
It's like, what can you teach us about your experience of going through your deconstruction, but then staying for the reconstruction of it all?
Right.
That kind of testimony, I think, would be a lot more powerful to the people you're trying to reach out to as a venue who is going to cancel a Christian artist. I mean, we're assuming it's some kind of a church, or it's at least owned by Christians. You had an opportunity to reach out to the believers that might still be willing to come to a Lecrae concert, but might not be going to church because they're giving up on it.
Every pastor at every church prays for revival, for renewing of the church, for growth. And it's here. You have this new generation that is looking for guidance, that is looking for a bridge to the bigger questions. They're gay, they're women, they're people who don't accept the male power structure of the established church. They're willing to revisit scripture again and take a fresh shot at reinterpreting it without all the baggage that's come in the last 2,000 years. And all of a sudden the church goes, where's the opportunities? They're nowhere. Well, that's wrong. The opportunity's everywhere. You just don't like it.
There's a lot of, if you start from scratch, like you had for a little while there, the quote unquote emerging church movement, right? Mm-hmm. Which it died as quickly as it started, right? Because people quickly figured out how much of value there already was there. There were people who weren't willing to give up on the church. Some of them came to conclusions that the established traditional church did not like. That happens, okay? But so much of what makes the church, they retained. And that's a massive thing. They didn't say, it's not the emergent church. The church is already here. It's always been here. But they figured out what had value. And of course, there's a lot of things that the church has gotten itself wrapped into, which does not have value. And those fresh eyes can point out to us places where the church needs to be doing better.
And it's very human for all of us to lean on our own experience, right? And so for many people in church leadership, our own experience means years and years and years of seminary and study, and other people's definitions of what good theology is, good orthodoxy is, good doctrine is. And we forget that the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, is always doing something new. And when new things are happening, you can't lean on anything, right? You just got to stand up and you got to walk through it. And so that's my encouragement to church leaders out there today. Don't be afraid to walk through the things that are hard and messy, because there's lots of lessons there, not only for you as the leader, but for the flock of people that you've been charged with shepherding.